Today's project, I've got a new hood release cable because mine's starting to not work very well. I got a new map sensor and a new connector for that one because the connector was broken because it got dry rotted. So I also have a water pump. I think mine's making a little bit of noise. It's intermittent. I'm not quite sure what it is, but one old trick that I learned a long time ago is if you're not quite sure where the squeak is coming from, take a long screwdriver, put it on the part, and then rest it against your ear. And if you hear that squeal coming through the handle of the screwdriver, you can pretty much tell where that's at. I'm going to take the belt off too, and then you can spin each one of your things like your compressor, alternator, water pump, power steering pump. Spin them all independently, and you can usually hear like a grinding or a squeaking coming from those. So I'm going to try and get a couple of little things done and then try and tackle the water pump today. But first we're going to do the hood release. So I had to take out the jack down in here, and it has 3 bolts on the bottom that connect that mounting bracket, but the hood release cable is going underneath that, so we're going to really get that out first. Another bolt broke off of there, so I've just got the 2 bolts with that one. And then down in here, see, it's got a little rubber grommet that moves through the firewall. I'll tell you another thing. I'm not getting any money from Rock Auto, but I get a lot of my parts that I can from Rock Auto. This came from them. It's a Dorman, and it was like half the price of going to AutoZone. I mean, yeah, you got to go and pay shipping, but a lot of these parts are the exact same as you would get at AutoZone or O'Reilly's or whoever, and they're just so much cheaper. So much cheaper, it's ridiculous. So I try and put an order in for a whole bunch of things all at once. Shipping's usually not too bad anyways. Yeah, looks like the right size. So, like I said, Dorman part number is 912020. And if you want to wait a couple days, it's well worth it. Cut this thing if I can. There we go. Need it anymore. So it looks like down in here there's just a little, just a little metal clip that you just bend out. And that little piece is what was on there, and obviously I didn't have enough, wasn't tight enough, and I figured for as cheap as that part was, I might as well just go get a new one. Not have to mess with trying to make that new one work. This thing could probably use a little more lube, but it looks like it's working okay. And then here's where mine mounted in there. I already took the 2 screws off because I was having to pull this thing off because I just could not get enough leverage when it was mounted onto the wall there. There's our handle. Pull that thing out. And then this thing, as you can see, way up in there, it's got a kind of a rubber grommet around it. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull that thing out or not, but yep, there we go. Now we're going to slide the whole thing through that new hole. So you can see that little hole there, and this one's got a new grommet on it. So what I'm gonna do, try it, feed that one in there. I'm gonna put my 2 bolts. Put my 2 bolts back on here and mount it. Push that brake pedal down, makes your life a little easier too. Alright. That's good there. So, got a little plastic loop here. I'm gonna set that on, gotta let that go through there, and then this hole in the pill, that in through there. I'm gonna try and get this down, snapped into place, and then that little plastic part snaps in there. Cable goes underneath the mounting bracket for this thing. This one back together here, and we'll move on to the map sensor. So the map sensor is another part I'm going to try and see if I can't figure out why, because my truck is still running pretty rich. I watched a couple other YouTube videos and other guys are talking about replacing this, and I figured, you know what, it's worth it, it's cheap, I can try and throw it on there real quick and see if that helps alleviate a little bit of our problems with the running rich, and if not, no worries. So you got a vacuum line that attaches to the top of it. It goes to the back of the carburetor TBI. You got a plug that goes in there, and I got a new plug here I need to replace because that clip that holds it in is broken. And I ought to have another one. I think it's actually just got delivered. I got a package I could open up. So that is 9/32. Worst part about these late 80s GM Chevys is half this is metric and half is English. It's very frustrating. Anymore, almost all the new Chevys that are coming out are almost all metric anyways. There's my old one. There's my new one. Looks identical. Let's put that. Put that plug back in there. vacuum running back on it. Make sure that's connected on the back side. I've already done my idle air control valve and my throttle position sensor and rebuilt the TBI. And I honestly didn't notice any change in performance when I rebuilt the TBI, but the gasket kit is relatively inexpensive and it was easy to do. There's tons of videos on there on YouTube, like I said, to show you how to do all that. So got that done. Now on to the water pump. As you can see, water pump's right down here, and I think I'm getting a squeak because it happens intermittently. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. I can't understand why, but to me, when it was making that squealing noise, it sounded like it was coming from the water pump. Like I said, put a screwdriver on there and held it up to the side of my ear, and it sounded like that squeak was coming from there. So I'm gonna replace it anyways. It's an older engine. I don't know how many miles are on it. It says 90,000. That could be 190,000. I don't know. So the good thing is I don't have to take this whole thing off, and I shouldn't have to mess with this. It looks like I just have to take the belt off. My 4 bolts should be on the water pump only. It does not look like they're connected to any of these other brackets. It looks completely separate. And then of course we'll take out the fan bolts and take out the fan and the clutch. The radiator shroud has got a top half and a bottom half, and they do disconnect with these little plastic pins. Literally, you just push up on the middle of the pin. It's kind of like the ones that hold the fenders, plastic fender skirts on the newer cars. So I'm gonna take those off, and I can take off the top half of this radiator shroud. But still need to drain the radiator, which is the biggest thing. So this bolt right here is a 5/8, and this is backwards threaded, and that's the tension pulley that's connected to this, and that's what's going to keep your belt tight, so that way everything can run correctly. So what I would do, sometimes there's a sticker, mine doesn't have one, but if you have to, take pictures or even make a quick drawing of the way or the route that these belts take, so that way when you go to put it back on, you're not stuck and you can't figure it out, because believe me, I've done that. So we're gonna get belt off, we'll get the top of this radiator shroud off. I like to get a big long breaker bar, because you need all the leverage you can get. Pull this thing over. Believe me, it's got tension. Take the belt off your alternator and then just let her loose. So it's going to come back a little bit further as well. So I would just say take your belt off and just leave it off to the side. Now's a perfect time. I put a new one on after I did the Vintage Air AC, because I had to get a longer belt, because the factory one is not correct. It's not the right length. So I had to put one that was a little bit longer, and it seems to be working. I haven't had any issues with it. So let's see about taking this radiator hose off. I might as well take this top one off too, because I plan on just pulling out the thermostat altogether. Oops. Just enough so we can loosen that up. Sometimes the belts might get jammed in there. As long as you can turn that and pull it, you should be fine. So we can leave this off to the side. I don't think we have to pull it off. No. I'm gonna pull it off. And if you've got the time, now's a perfect chance, perfect opportunity to replace your hoses, because you got the system completely drained and you don't have to worry about don't have to worry about spilling more antifreeze or having to drain out brand new antifreeze that you just put in because you want to do something else. So if you're doing this, just do your hoses, do your thermostat hoses, get all of it at once. Get that off. Now, get these plugs, these pins. Sometimes you can even just kind of pry up with a screwdriver, and that will come off just like that. This top half, like I said, that top half comes off. And then, as you can see, we've got way as you can see, I got way better access to work at all this. I probably could take the bottom one off, but honestly, it's not really in my way. I just need to get this pulley off. So let's listen to these. That one is kind of, I don't know if you can hear it or not, but that's a little noisy. That one's okay. This is brand new, so that should not be doing anything. This has been replaced, that's been replaced. Power steering pump. Other than the belt sliding on it. As you can hear, it's just about perfectly silent. This alternator, though, that makes me a little nervous. So I might try and rebuild this. I don't know. I've watched some videos on it. It doesn't look too hard, but I mean, if it was just a plain old alternator and it was 50 bucks, I would just put another alternator on it and not have to worry about it. Because, like I said, I don't know much about the history of this vehicle. So, that alternator could be working just fine. I don't have any electrical problems. I don't have any lights coming on. Seems to be working just fine. So, I'm just going to leave it. Get this water pump done now. Get that on fan pulley. I'm either going to say ½ inch or 7/16, but it looks like ½ inch is correct. Now, what I need to do is I need to get tension back on this thing. Do. I'm gonna put my belts back on everything here, so I can get this thing tight, so I get a little more tension on this pulley, so it's not just sliding around free. There we go. Put the belt back on. Next, I'm gonna use some PB Blaster on those bolts, which I probably should have done earlier, but whatever. I'll figure it out later. While I'm at it, I'm gonna hit my bolts for the water pump. They look pretty grease coated, so hopefully they're not too bad. I still need to disconnect the bottom radiator hose. 9/16 first. If that fits. Yep, that works. What we can do is we can try and start loosening up a couple of these bolts. Nice, nice. Coming up very nicely. When you're loosening any bolts that are bolted like directly into the engine block, last thing you want to deal with is breaking one of those bolts off inside, because then you're done. You're not going to be able to put the old water pump back on. It's not going to seal. You're going to have it leaking, and you're literally going to spend however much time drilling that thing out, and it's not fun. So my advice is, if it feels like it's super tight and it doesn't want to come loose, soak it with some WD-40 or PB Blaster. Let it set for 20-30 minutes, whatever you want to do. Let it soak for a while. come back. You can hit it with some heat, get a little torch like a propane torch or a MAP gas torch, heat it up a little bit, but of course be careful with your gas and you don't want to light yourself on fire. But try tightening the bolt a little bit, then loosening. Even if it's just a hair, just go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until that bolt finally comes loose. You can always replace the bolts, but taking out a broken stud inside your engine block is not what you want to spend your entire weekend doing. And as you can see, this one's coming out pretty nice. I'm in Arizona, so we really don't have to worry about a whole lot of rust, which is nice. Because the rust is usually the culprit. And I probably don't need to worry about the orientation of the bolts, like from side to side, top to bottom, because I'm pretty sure they're all the same size. But it doesn't hurt if you want to mark them. Put them on a piece of cardboard and mark them, or whatever you need to do. But you can put them, make sure they go back in the exact same spot that they came out of. Then you don't have to worry about that problem. It's kind of a good habit to get into as well, because there's times, especially when I do my TBI, some of those bolts are longer than others, and you don't want to have to sit there and mess around trying to remember or figure out where your mistake was. Just take a little bit of time in the beginning, try to figure out which one goes where. Usually works a whole lot better for you. I'm gonna try the bottom one on the left side. Put some PB Blaster on there. I'm gonna take off my fan. Usually there's one of these spots that has a bigger gap, so we can all get in here to get better access to work on some of these. They seem like they're all loosening up. Putting the belts back on is very key, because that's what giving that tension, so you don't have to worry about this thing spinning all over the place. Take the belt back off. There's so much tension on that spring, it's going to bring your handle way back down there. But now I can rotate this. Now that they're all broken loose, I don't have to worry about fighting this thing. I can just get in here with my fingers, take those off. If you are swapping out your belt, it's not a bad idea to keep the old one. Throw it in the back, throw it in a toolbox, put it someplace in case you're ever out off-roading or out in the forest, out in the desert or whatever. You don't have to worry about if you lose a belt. You got your old one as a spare. To at least get you home or get you to the road. Try to pry this one up a little bit. There we go. Actually, that one came off all the way. Did it break? Nope. Your hose clamps are getting old and beat up. It's another perfect opportunity to replace those. Now, sometimes these get on here, they kind of get heated up and then they kind of get stuck to the side of the water neck. As you can see, I'm kind of having to pry at this. Probably still going to lose some more antifreeze. That's okay. I've got the majority of it drained out. I'm getting some squirting out of the hole where that bolt was I took out a little bit ago. Yeah, this looks full.
4 bolts, 9/16. Again, if you got a 12-point socket or a 6-point socket, use a 6-point socket. You have less chance of stripping the head or rounding it off. Because there again, it's just about as bad as a broken bolt. You round those things off. It's really not something you want to have to deal with either. Because trying to get in here with a pair of vice grips or something is not gonna be possible. I'm gonna check this one again. Yeah, those two are the same length. They all appear to be, looking at the new water pump mounting surfaces, look to be all the same. Yep, she's coming off. Pull out that last bolt so we don't lose it. We're gonna have some more antifreeze coming out of that. There we go. Here we can get a better idea of their height. Actually, if we wanted to, we'd even put a level on there. Just make sure they're the exact same size. Now, the tricky part here is going to be getting my studs off. So, if I remember correctly, this should... Okay, well that was easy. Why do I have a feeling the other ones are not going to be this easy? Basically, just take 2 of the nuts, put the 2 nuts back on your stud. See if this will just turn. Oh, that one's just coming right out. Put your 2 nuts on there. Tighten them down onto each other a little bit. Probably further down is probably better. So I got our 2 nuts on here. They don't have to be exactly lined up, but what we're going to do then is we're going to go to the bottom nut and I'll try and tighten this one down. Tighten them down against each other as much as I can. And then, there we go. Now, here's the next problem. Let's take this off while I'm at this position. Get that nut, those 2 nuts broken loose from each other. There you go. That's how you get those studs out. You can see there's a short end and a long end. Remember, your short end is going to go into the pulley. You guys need that longer end to get your lock washer and nut onto to secure that. So you want these all the way down. Now what I'm going to do, try and tighten them a little bit, doing the opposite. Doesn't have to be super tight. Just enough. Well, pop that top nut. Let's save these nuts because the nuts are going to go back on there. Got our water pump all ready to go. I decided to paint mine up with some high temperature paint just because I figure I might as well. It's bare metal. I'd rather it look a little bit nicer. My truck not a show truck. Plan on popping the hood at car shows. But for the couple dollars that it cost in paint and the extra little bit of time that it took, it's well worth it. If you do, make sure you use a high temperature paint and a high temperature primer, because otherwise it's just going to burn right off, and then you'll have to start the job all over again. Last thing you want to do is have to pull this all apart just to say that you wanted to paint this. Rock Auto 2 for this one. Again, I'm not getting any kickback or anything from Rock Auto. I started using their website and I've been finding their stuff super cheap. This is an official, it's an AC Delco water pump. The part number was 252719. I went to the local auto parts chain store's website, and the exact same AC Delco water pump for the Blazer, exact same part number, was twice as much locally. And I'd rather spend a little bit extra and get a good AC Delco one that has a better warranty than just buying something cheap and throwing it on there, because that's not going to do you any good either. As you can see, this whole front of the engine is just dirty and disgusting. I'm going to take a tiny bit of time to clean this up, but the biggest thing that you want to do is, you can see where the water pump did mount. Looks like somebody, see, look at that old gasket. It's nothing. There's nothing there. There's a little bit of gasket material, some silicone, but you want this metal surface. You can see I've got antifreeze coming out of the bolt hole. You want to clean that up really good. You want all of that old gasket material off of there. You want this thing as clean as possible, because even when you put your gaskets on, you put some RTV on it, there's still a good chance that you can leak, because if you got some crud in there, something didn't get cleaned off quite well, it's gonna cause a leak, because the antifreeze is under a lot of pressure and it's gonna find the path of least resistance. And if that's where it's gonna leak, and it's not something you wanna have to deal with. So I'm gonna clean this up a little bit with some brake cleaner. I'm gonna plug those holes up with like a little bit of a rag so I don't get any crud in there, any of the stuff I'm cleaning off. So I'm gonna try and do that real quick.